Pulling the Trigger is brought to you by Easy Vape North Shore, the industry's leading direct retailer of the highest quality personal vaporizers, e-cigs, vapes, and Canadian-made e-juice. Located at 987 Marine Drive in North Vancouver, or you can check them out online at www.easyvapecanada.com. You can also donate to my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/MarkHughesComic. Hey everybody. So I listened to the first episode of Pulling the Trigger, and God, I hate the sound of my voice. One of the things I realized I have to do is I have to stop going with my guests. It's all those days at the crisis line where you have to make sure that the suicidal person knows you're listening all the time and not texting with a girl that you like. Not that I would know anything about that. So, tonight it is, what is the date tonight? It is the morning, 1:30 a.m., Friday, November 3rd. The episode will be released next Thursday. I am doing laundry, getting ready to fly to Prince George in a few hours. I am doing 4 shows up there. 2 tonight, technically. 1 at 7 p.m., 1 at 9:30, and 2 on Saturday. 1 at 7 p.m., 1 at 9:30 at Sonar Nightclub. By the time you get to listening to this, I will have already done the shows. The episode that I am doing this intro for was recorded last week, and it's a little bit of a trip down memory lane. The man that I'm interviewing, I met in prison long time ago. And I wanted to interview him because he's done some interesting things. And a lot of people I know have never had any contact with the criminal justice system. Maybe a drunk tank at worst, but they've never even been inside the back of a police car. And Glenn Flett, my guest, is someone who has been convicted of murder. I'll let him tell the story. But I thought, this is someone I think that people should meet, even if digitally. Because he's done a lot of neat things, and what he's done with his life since getting out of prison is even more remarkable. He runs an organization called L.I.N.C, Long-Term Inmates Now in the Community, and I shouldn't say he runs it. He helped found it, but he's involved in it now. And the interview took place at a farm he operates, called Emma's Acres, and they actually have inmates from a nearby prison come and help. One guy, you'll hear during the interview, asked if I wanted a smoky, and I did. It was very good. And it, like I said in the previous episode, it's always interesting to realize how little I know about things, even though I think I know about them. Glenn's description and of his experience with responsibility really got me thinking. I'm still thinking about it more than a week later, because I thought I knew about responsibility, but I'll let him describe it. One of the things I wanted to clarify is he mentions a few institutions by name in the interview, and I can't remember if I clarified throughout. Kent Institution is the maximum security in British Columbia. Millhaven is one of the maximum securities in Ontario. We met in Mountain Institution. I can't remember any others that he mentioned, but I met him when I was back in for robbing the bank. That's another story for another day. Stay tuned. This will give you a reason to keep listening to the episode. And he had fucked his parole up, which he'll go into. And, you know, I just was fascinated because I got to see him, and I hadn't seen him in years. And it's really cool to see what happens with people when they get out of prison and what they do with their lives, especially when they stay out. What's going on for me lately? Just comedy. The usual, like I said, going to Prince George for 4 shows. Next week, not much. Trying to organize something for Edmonton, hopefully a dirty show. A buddy of mine and I are talking about. We just got to find a venue. So anyone who's in Alberta, stay tuned. Might have something for you by the end of the year, a dirty show. No big gigs to speak of yet. Hoping to hear a few things. Just going to continue doing my open mics and whatnot. As always, Comedy Shocker is in getting cooking. We're working on it. Lineup will be announced next week. The next Comedy Shocker 15, January 13th at the Rickshaw Theatre. Get your tickets at comedyshocker.com. We've got a good lineup, and our headliner is someone who I'm really pleased to announce, so stay tuned. And you can keep up to date with all our goings-on at Comedy Shocker on Instagram and Twitter, and Comedy Shocker Facebook page. So, why don't we listen to what Glenn Flett has to say? So, yeah, it has been a while. I think the last time I saw you was at Doug Llewellyn's Cake in 2008?
Yeah.
Or something like that. You ever see Doug?
Yeah,
much?
yeah, I do, yeah.
Where's he living these days?
He lives here in Mission.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Remember, I used to live with him for a while.
Yes, that's right, too.
And then he moved to Chilliwack and then Victoria?
They were still, I think they moved to Abbotsford, but they moved out of that house that they were living in that they could put a home placement in. And they moved over by the hospital in Abbotsford for a while. And then he went from there to Victoria and worked for L.I.N. for, maybe a year or so. And so did Wendy. She ended up getting a job there and moving over. And then he came back here and started working with the guys he was working with before. Shame on me.
Triangle,
yeah. And basically started working for them again.
Right.
And we had her job over in Victoria for quite a while, but she ended up deciding to, it was too much hassle coming back and forth and everything. So she moved over here and took over. I don't know if you remember Barb. Remember Barb? Well, she took over Barb's operation.
Okay, excellent.
Barb sort of retired and she started running the show now.
Barb's on my Facebook. I'm sitting here with Glenn Flett, and we're in Mission, BC, and it looks like the name of your place is Emma's Acres?
That's right.
Yeah. So, why don't you... What do you do these days? How do you fill your time? What's your role? Do you have a job? What's your identity?
Yeah, well, I'm a farmer.
Okay.
That's, I think, one of the things, but I think we're growing more than vegetables here.
Okay.
So it's a vegetable farm.
Okay.
But we get guys from prison to come out on ETAs and work release, and they come and work on the farm alongside of victims. So people who have been seriously impacted by crime like homicide. Okay. A lot of them drop in here, help. Sometimes they volunteer. We have one guy that actually gets paid by us. He's a volunteer that picks guys up and brings them out. So we pay him to do that, but he's a victim of a homicide. And
wow.
So yeah, we got that kind of interaction between victims and offenders going on a pretty regular basis. Plus our community, we lease this property for $1 a year, and the city's very supportive of what we do, and so quite often we have visitors. Like a lot of people drop in, and I think we're growing hope. Okay,
as well as carrots.
As well as carrots. Yeah.
So those fellas that I saw walking in, those were inmates?
Yes.
What institution are they from?
These all are from Mission Minimum.
Okay.
But we get them from Quee too, and we've had a couple guys from Mission Medium. Okay. And one of our goals is to actually get this project going so that it brings guys from Medium here first. Okay. Then they can prove themselves and go to a minimum, and then still maybe come. But hopefully this is going to start to be a place where it can be a transition thing for people, right? And not only from into the community, but from prison to prison. Right. So we're working on that.
So for the listeners, medium means medium security.
Medium security.
Yeah, which is a higher security, but not quite like the movies. It's a bit lower than that, and the institution that the gentlemen are here from today is a minimum security, which generally means, what does that mean generally?
Well, it means that they're low risk to escape, low, good institutional adjustment, and low public safety. Right?
No fence around the place
there's
either,
well, there are. In William has a a minimum, and it has an ocean and a fence around it, sort of. So, but generally it's about the internal workings and the externals for sure. You know, that people most often in minimum could walk away, I guess, if they wanted to.
Right.
But again, they're seen as people who are not going to escape or anything, and so it's the, you know, you might call it the door jam to the community, right? So it's sort of like they're walking through the door,
right?
And they're expected to behave like that, right?
Right. I remember when I was in minimum, Quay is the last one I was in. Quay Quelp. It's a Aboriginal focused, what they call healing village. I remember sometimes minimum security was actually harder time on the head than medium.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the community's right there. Absolutely. And you're like kind of fighting with yourself all the time.
And you have more choices to make. And I mean, again, it's supposed to be preparing you to go out into the community where, again, as a person that's been released a few times, I can tell you it's a harrowing experience when you first get out. And so they're trying to prepare you to be able to make choices and stuff, because, you know, most of the time in prison you aren't making any choices.
Right.
Really. I mean, pretty basic choices.
That was one of my favorite parts about it, really, if I'm being honest. Right?
Yeah, it's hardly no responsibility. Yeah. You don't have to really show up to anything. Even if you have a job, you can say, I don't feel good today, and so what, right? Big deal. But out here, of course, that's all changed. And so to prepare people for that, you know, you need, you know, this. We've been doing this for 25 years in different ways,
right?
But this farm thing has really worked out to be ideal for what we were trying to do. So we're, you know, preparing guys to get out, make choices. They come to work here. They kind of choose what they want to do. I mean, there's certain tasks that need to be done, but, you know, we kind of let people choose and find their own way, take ownership of what they're doing, so they can, you know, feel if they make a mistake, they make a mistake. So, you know, but nobody's condemning them or anything, because we're all learning here. It's a learning thing, right? So it's a very safe environment that way, and it helps people prepare for those choices they're going to have to make on the street. Not the same choices, of course, but just choice making. Period is a skill, right? And,
absolutely.
You know, and it's not really given you in jail. So you lose if you had any good choice tools. You've lost them by the time you get out.
They atrophy. Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier, and that's probably a good segue into my next question. You said that you'd been released a couple times yourself.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get into this work? I think that ties into it.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I got into this work by accident, really.
Okay.
You know, it was more what I started doing in jail. So up until about 1982, I was a pretty rebellious prisoner, and I didn't get along well in prison. I'd say I had high institutional adjustment needs. I spent a fair amount of time in segregation over the years, and just I got in. You know, I thought it was my job as a prisoner to get into trouble every day, right? You know, that was my job, right? You know, they were there to stop me from doing that, and I was there to try to get away with it, right? So I played that game from the time I was 19 till about when I was 32.
Okay.
And then I had a religious experience. I became a Christian, right?
Okay.
Unexpectedly, because I didn't really ever think I'd be a Christian.
Right.
I was actually anti-Christian probably prior to that.
Right.
And so it wasn't something I was really looking into getting into, but I just sort of fell into it, and it changed the way I looked at the world.
Right.
And so instead of being somebody that was always paranoid and mistrusting of people and trying to see what was in it for me if I was doing something for somebody, you know, I mean, not that I didn't do things for people. I've always had a bit of a generous spirit that way, but usually it was with a hidden motive or expectation that I was going to get something in return.
There's always a bit of an agenda, right?
So when I became a Christian, I felt, I'm not a Bible thumper, but I fell into the ideology strongly, and the whole notion of just giving back and not expecting things in return, and just to be kind to others and help them get through their misery, because we're all struggling, and through our life, especially. And then when I became a Christian, I was in maximum security prison, so people there were struggling a lot, but it was a great missionary position, right? Like here I am
in the trenches,
in the trenches, right? I didn't have to go off to Africa, and it was right there, right? And basically, I was lucky. I ran into a couple of chaplains that liked who I was and encouraged me to be part of their ministry, and so I had an open line to them, and so guys would come to me with their problems, and then this guy that I'd known for a long time who I told when I was back east and in my negative days, I'd help him when he got out to BC, because I was from BC originally and we were on Millhaven together.
Right.
And I said I had some friends and stuff out here who I did have these people that I could have connected him up with, but when I became a Christian, all of a sudden when he came to me, he ended up getting transferred sort of unexpectedly to Kent, and he was getting out. And he said, well, you told me you got some friends out here. I need some help. I got nobody. I don't know anybody out here.
Right. Out here meaning BC.
Out here in BC. So, I couldn't turn him on to the people I was going to turn him on to before, because I just wouldn't have felt that was okay. Right? I would just like sending him out to the Lion's Den the first day he's out, right?
Yeah, since you'd last seen him, there was a paradigm shift, right?
I changed my view of what was right and wrong.
And what help means, too, right?
And what help means, exactly. Right? Exactly. What help means is a big point. And so, anyways, I looked around and I found this Christian family who was willing to take him in.
Oh, cool.
So that was sort of the beginning of what I do today. Okay. So I started to help people from that point on, not just inside prison, but help them prepare for release plans. I went to, before I ever went to a parole hearing for my own self, I'd gone to about seven parole hearings prior to that for other people. So I started learning about what the parole board was looking for, and just again to coach people through the process. It's pretty sometimes daunting for some people, and especially some people that were illiterate. The people I first started helping were actually people that couldn't speak English very well, so it was a second language, or they were illiterate and couldn't understand something. So that's how I started to go to the parole hearings to represent those people
as like an advocate.
Yeah, right. So, and then when I got transferred to lower security, I just kept on building on that, and in every institution I was encouraged by the staff even so to help people, right? And what I liked about it was that they didn't put any demands on me, right? So I wasn't asked to go out and find out information about anybody or anything. In fact, I really challenged, back to that, becoming a Christian challenged everything I believed. So I always believed that the guards were always trying to fish for stuff and trying to turn everybody into a rat, and, all that stuff. And when I started helping people, I found that they weren't really that interested in all that information. They had other people that were giving them information, right? So they didn't need me, right? I guess. And they encouraged me to just help people at the level that I could, right? You know? And then when I got out, I was a cook, so I was working in restaurants, and this woman who had given us a life skills program in prison came to me. I became quite a good friend of hers. She came to me when I was on parole and said, gee, she was wanting to start this program inside that would have a 3 months inside part and a 3 month outside part. And she knew I knew some people. I'd done some PR work for the CSC for parole and stuff in particular, and I went to schools and talked and all that kind of stuff in those days. And so she asked me if I had any connections at regional, and I did, and I connected her up with them. And I wasn't planning to be really a part of it. She was just going to make me an advisor and pay me a little money to help her advise her sometimes. But basically, it wasn't my idea; it was hers. And but they dicked around with her for a while, and then after about 9 months of dicking around and saying, no, you got to change this or that, they finally were honest and said, listen, we aren't really interested in that program. So part of a big problem was, how do you guarantee the people that are doing the program inside for 3 months get a parole to do the remaining 3 months on the street? So that was one of the biggest obstacles for sure. And so anyways, but when they said that, they said, but we're very interested in starting some kind of support network out here in the community, and we liked what you did in jail, and we were wondering if you, not her, but you, would start a support network, and again, we'll pay you a little bit of money to do that. So I was working as a cook. I said, sure, I guess, after thinking about it, I said, sure, I'll do that. Started up a little support group, did that as well as working in the kitchen and working as a cook. But as time went on in these support groups, issues would come up that needed help, that not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it. Like, oh, gee, I have to move. I'm getting evicted, and I haven't got any money, and I got all this furniture, and how am I going to do that? So I became a guy that did that. That we helped move. That we could have opened a moving company. I think
kind of a fixer.
Kind of just you got a problem. Let's see what we can do about it together. Usually, not me fixing it exactly, but involving me and my ideas and thinking and their ideas and thinking
and community involvement. I take it too.
Well, and the more we did that, the more involvement we got with the community. So L.I.N.C had started to. Probably working with the community through Mission Community Services.
And just for the listeners, what's L.I.N.C?
L.I.N C stands for Long-Term Inmates Now in the Community.
And that's the organization?
That's the organization that was, I sort of started it in 1992.
Okay.
It wasn't a society at first. We didn't become a society until 1997, I think. But because we expanded so big, our services were appreciated. And we ended up getting quite a few contracts. So once I hit a certain financial height, they didn't want to pay me directly. In fact, I was the only prisoner that I know of in history that was ever paid directly for my services to the CSC. Usually they go through John Howard or some other society, and then you work for them.
You're like a subcontractor.
I was kind of like a John Howard, my own self, You know? So I was in a unique position. And bottom line, though, we got so much, and you can't just have paying that much money to one person. So they said I had to form a society. So we did that in 1997, I think it was.
With like a board of directors?
With a board of directors and everything. And so since then, we've been running as a society.
Oh, nice. Okay, wow. Well, people who are listening to this are going to want to know one thing. And as a guy who's been to the joint, I hate asking these questions, but this is for people who don't really know this stuff.
No,
what were you in prison for?
Well, my current sentence is life.
Okay.
So, but I've served multiple sentences.
Okay.
So I started getting into trouble when I was 19 and did 2 provincial bits.
Right.
And then I went to Penn when I was 23.
Yeah.
Or maybe not 23, 22. I was almost 23, and haven't been out of federal custody since then.
Right.
But I've done various sentences, like 1, 2, 3, I think 4 convictions in that period of time. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've never actually finished that first original 5-year sentence, and I ended up parlaying it into a life sentence, which is actually quite a common story.
Right.
It's not that unusual. Well, it depends on who they are, but I mean, there is one sort of group of people that once bitten, they can't get away. It just kind of escalates.
Me. Once I went to jail the first time, I couldn't really stay out for longer than a couple months at a time.
Absolutely. It just sort of gets you, and you just, and you're out mad and angry, and you're not working through your issues when you get out. Nope. You kind of just want to get everything as easy as you can. And, all those things that cause you to commit crimes, it just escalated. So, I've been in and out, but I got life in 1978. Well, my sentence didn't actually come out until 1980, but the crime happened in 1978, and so when you're doing life, it's the day you are arraigned that your sentence starts if you get convicted. So say you got, I was arraigned on June the 29th in 1978, but I didn't actually go to trial until 1980 or 1979, and then it ran into 80, and I was sentenced then. But all those years that I was in jail for that, that counted on my sentence, whatever my minimum was.
And what did you get life sentence for?
I got life sentence for shooting a man during a holdup in Toronto. I was in the Anglican Square there. We were pulling a Brink's Courier score, and had taken the Brink's Courier out, and were leaving, and an innocent man tried to stop us. His name was Theodore Van Slateman, and he ended up getting shot to death.
Okay, so murder was the conviction?
Yes, absolutely.
Second degree?
Murder. Yeah.
Yeah, see, this isn't an unusual story for me, but it's. I live in Vancouver, and I interact with most of the people I interact with have never had even. They don't even know anyone who's ever been arrested. So when I tell them that, like, oh, I'm going to interview a guy, he's doing life, and they say, what do you mean life? What's that? And I go, oh, life sentence. I go, what do you get a life sentence for? I said, oh, murder. And then they ask me a bunch of questions about it, and that's one of the reasons I got thinking, oh, I wonder if this might be an interesting interview, right? Because most people I know these days, this is a complete myth. This is Hollywood to them. You know what I mean? And
I'm glad it is too, by the way.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because it is a bit of a nightmare living the life that I led. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, who wants to live in that chaos?
Absolutely. It's so. How long you been out for now?
Well, this time I've been out for about almost 11 years. It'll be in November.
Right.
But I was out for 15 years prior to that.
Right.
And then I went back to jail for about 19 months.
Right. I remember that when that happened. We ran into each other. I violated my parole because I robbed a bank. And
yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, too. And I think you'd started. Was it something to do with drugs or something like that?
No, it was a gun.
It was a gun.
I got busted with a loaded gun.
Oops. And 19 months, I guess that's not too bad.
Well, I was very lucky.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that saved me is when I got sentenced to life for shooting a man, the judge was so certain I think I wasn't going to get out that he didn't put a prohibition on me. So if I'd had a prohibition on me, I would have got a higher sentence.
Right, yeah. I have a lifetime prohibition, too.
So luckily I didn't have that, so the judge had more liberty to give me whatever,
right,
kind of a.
And then probably because of all the work he'd done in the community.
That's exactly. That judge was very inspirational because I went back, I was suffering from clinical depression. I'd been under psychiatric care for about a year before I went back to jail. And finally I snapped over something. I got paranoid. Right. Thought somebody was threatening. Well, somebody had threatened me, but I mean, nothing happened. So I have to say that it was an unfounded threat. Right. But when I left the day that I left with a loaded gun, I wasn't sure it was unfounded. In fact, I'd convinced myself it could be very real. So I ended up in this sort of jackpot situation, right? And the judge saw that I was obviously not totally mentally firing on all 8 cylinders, not only at the time of the offense, but even when I went for sentencing, I was still suffering from just getting off of the medications that I'd been on to deal with the clinical depression. And so he saw that, and he liked the work I did. And he was a Crown prosecutor, actually. I had an interesting lawyer. I'd done a lot of work with him with other people, and so when I went to jail, I got him, and we were pretty good friends at the time. But that whole incident, well, especially my sentencing, ended up defriending us. We've never been friends since then.
Oh, wow.
He was really against me going in front of this particular judge. He was a Crown attorney for 20 years. Right. First prosecuted murders and stuff. Yeah. And he was really paranoid I was going to get a really stiff sentence from him. Right. Right. But I had my family was there, and the people that were going to testify on my behalf were there, and I mean, I was guilty. Yeah. So whether I got a less sentence or a bigger sentence, it's sort of irrelevant, sort of at that point. When you take responsibility for what you've done, that really is true. All of a sudden, it doesn't. The punishment isn't really the issue. The issue is you did something wrong, and you will face whatever consequences just because of that. Not there's no point in crying about it. Right? You did it, and you made a bad choice. Right? Exactly. So bottom line is that's how I approached it, and I think the judge saw that too, and so he gave me a pretty light sentence. Although I could have got out in 4 months. Right. But I was kept in 19 months. I'm on life parole, so I had to get another parole. Right. And the corrections service wasn't really all that helpful to me. Right. No. They were kind of angry that I was back in jail, and some of them because they were supporters of mine, and I'd let them down, so they felt like I victimized them. Right. And some of them because they didn't like me when I was doing the job I was doing before. They didn't think somebody like me should be doing it. Right. So they were running around saying how right they were, and kind of when they saw me, kind of jabbing me about how right. The ultimate "I told you so," eh? So it was an interesting prison experience. And when I first went back, I actually got so entangled in what I was doing out here that it was a huge relief to be back in jail. I know that because I was really, really tight. I had a huge amount of responsibilities on me, and they just finally overwhelmed me. And so when I got to jail, I had no responsibility. It felt pretty free, almost freeing. Right? They held that against me. I told them that. And they actually later wrote that in a negative way in my report, which I suppose that sounds negative in a way, but that's because somebody that's never been in that experience doesn't understand how that could feel and how that might be, right? It's a big thing getting out of jail and changing your life and working hard at it, and sometimes you can overdo it. Absolutely. Perfect segue into the next question I was going to have. So when you got out, maybe not the second time, but the first time, what would you say the hardest stuff was? Like, what was the steepest learning curve? My emotions. So, and in particular, I became a Christian, and I hadn't cried since about the time I was 11 years old. Right. I don't know. I just thought that was not, you don't do that. Yeah. So I remember when I became a Christian, and I was watching a movie in Kent. So I'd only been a Christian a couple years. Right. And I started tearing up and sort of kind of crying, right? It was kind of cool. And I thought, wow, now I'm free. I can get in touch with my emotions, and I thought I did. I thought, I worked through a lot of the issues that I thought, the resentments and the guilt and all the things that I had been pent up in me for a long time. And I thought, gee, I'm pretty good, right? And I got that shit down now, right? But when I got out, most of that stuff kind of resurfaced. So even though, luckily I had the experience of going through it already,
right.
And I was a lot more mature than I'd been maybe before when I was young, right? So I was able to cope with emotional sort of management issues and anger and frustration and resentments and feeling like a victim, and powerless, and all those things that can happen to you. And when you get out of jail, quite often you think you're going to have a big peef on your forehead and everybody's going to notice you.
Yeah.
And very quickly after you're out for a while, you realize nobody notices you. Yeah. Nobody. They could walk right over on top of you, just stomp on you, and nobody's going to give a shit.
How insignificant
As
you really
we're
are.
in jail, they couldn't do that. At least there you're somebody. You can't just walk over you there. Right?
We're worth $100,000 a year to them, right?
So it's bottom line that's a challenging thing, and just getting in touch with my family and things that I or kept from too. The other thing is when you're in prison, if you have a family in particular, they often keep things from you that they should tell you. Right. But they don't tell you. So you don't learn them until you're out of jail. So now you're catching up. Yeah. And often that too causes some resentments and feelings, like, well, why didn't you tell me? And how come I got to deal with this now?
Yeah.
So that whole oppressive thing was probably the hardest thing I had to go through. I had a huge support network.
Oh, cool.
Which really helped me with all that stuff and kept me not doubt. I did doubt myself. So when you're going through that, one of the biggest things happens is you start believing that maybe you're really fucked up. And what's the point of even trying? If I'm not fucked up, why would I even try, right? So I might as well just fucking give up and fuck it, right? So to have people around you that say, no, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
And, no, that's normal. And you're, you got to do this a little different or that.
Right.
Little. But that's just so crucial for that first, especially after you've been in jail. That time I'd been in jail for about 14 years straight. Right. So, it was quite the jump from being in jail for that long and into a free world. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can identify with a lot of that stuff. I remember when getting out, it was like being parachuted into a foreign culture, and they speak the same language, sort of, but the words don't mean the same thing. And it's like I would say something, and people would be like, they'd get either like shocked or offended, because you know how we talk in the joint, small talk in the joint. Who got stabbed? Who's got the dope? Who checked in? Right. Who cares? Right. That's just what.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And then you get out, and I never followed the Canucks, so I don't know what, I don't know how to small talk, I would inadvertently alienate myself, and that started causing it would exacerbate the doubt that you talked about. Because I'm like, and I used to think for my first 5 or 6 years out of the joint, I was like, I think I might have gone too far. Like, I think I might be too fucked up to do this. But similar. I had a community. So.
Again, that's it, and so it's so important, and that's one of the things the L.I.N.C strives to do is create the sense of community. Right? We have, besides the farm, we run weekly meetings. We've been running them for 25 years. Right. People come there and they feel like they're part of something, right? And I think that's a pretty important thing too for guys getting out. They need to find somewhere where they feel a part of. AA and those things are really good too. Yep. I certainly support all those ones, right? Because I think they help people feel like they're a part of a community and they're accepted, right? And it's hard to accept yourself even. Back to that, you get out thinking you got a big P on your forehead and that you're not really human, or you're not normal, right? How many people say to me, "Oh, gee, I want to be normal." Well, the truth is they are normal because everybody doubts they're being normal, right? So not just because you're getting out of prison, just everybody, if they're thinking about who they are, is going to come to the point when I was saying, am I really normal? I'm different than all these other weird people, right? I'm really weird, right? Yeah. So if you're being honest with yourself, that happens, whether you've been in prison or not. But in prison, that exasperates that part of us that thinks we're
you're
weird.
Always, one of the funny little mind, double speak things that they do in prison is you're always assessed on your risk level. You're never zero risk either. Right. It's always low, moderate, or high. That's so you end up internalizing this thing where you're dangerous.
Absolutely.
At some level, you're always dangerous. And then I used to just think, I don't give a shit what the POs say to me. Then I got out and I remember it would start coming up like, you got to be careful, don't scare people, don't. And I was like, where the fuck did that come from? And that's where it came
Absolutely,
from. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The longer you're in, the more that's ingrained in you.
Right.
And again, it is unconscious.
Yeah.
So that's one of the other problems is everybody gets out thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to do okay because I got it together.
Yeah.
And they don't know all the unconscious messages that are going on inside their head. And back to the support network. Crucial, because those people can say no, wait a minute, no, it's not like that, right? You're taking it wrong, or it's like let's look at this in a different light, and that can make the world a difference.
Right. So you have a family now. You have a wife and a daughter,
or
I do. More than one daughter? Or?
Well, no, I got one daughter, but I have kids from a previous marriage and stuff, so I got 4 kids altogether.
Oh wow!
But my oldest kids are in their 40s. So they grew up while I was in jail, and. Then my daughter, I had her when I was out of jail in 1997, and she was born. And then I went back to jail for a short time when she was 8, which was a traumatic experience for her. Really
because you'd been out her whole life, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it really, I really got. Wouldn't say, well, you might say it was a benefit. It was certainly a great insight into what happens when people go to prison and their children, right? So even though I'd had children, but I was in jail when my children were born, right? So they knew me being in prison pretty much. They'd visit me, and I got out a couple times and had a little bit of had contact with them, but not living with them, because my first wife and me had broken up on my first pen bit when they were born. So when I got out, I wasn't living with her, but I got access to them on the weekends and stuff. But I was only out for maybe 8 months, I think it was, and then I went back to jail. Well, I went on the run, or no, I went to jail again, and then I went on the run. So, I hadn't seen them really much in a way. I had lots of regular visits in jail, but even that's not the same as getting up in the middle of the night trying to soothe them when they're crying and stuff. Right? So there's a big difference. So, anyway, basically I found that's probably one of the things I speak about mostly when I go to schools. Yeah. Not about how tough it is in jail or anything, because it isn't. It is tough, although it's not that tough, but it is tough.
It is, and
but
it
the worst thing is that someday you're going to be a parent.
Right.
And how do you deal with that problem that you've been in prison and all that with your kids? How do you do that? How do you? So that's something we should all think about.
Does your daughter know you've been to prison?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Does she know what it was for?
Oh yeah, sure.
How did that conversation happen?
Well, I mean, with my daughter, that conversation just happened naturally. I've been a pretty high-profile guy. I've been in the news.
Since you got guys coming to your house who are from the joint and stuff like that.
And since I got out in '92, I've had something written about me in a newspaper, magazine, or something every year. Right. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them. So, and as soon as she could read, for sure, she got that. Yeah. But even before that, because the people that we associate with know, we aren't hiding who we are. Right. And we're right out there, so everybody in the community knows about me, and nobody, it's she just learned to accept that easily. For my sons, it was harder. Okay. And I didn't tell them until they were maybe 12. Right. They were coming and seeing me on PFEs and everything. Right.
But they didn't understand what it is, really,
that's right? At first. And then they finally did get around to asking, right? Just come out and ask it. I didn't tell them exactly. They asked, and then I told them. I waited for that to happen. I didn't think it would be okay to just sort of tell them one casual meeting. Oh, by the way, I'm doing life for murder, and that's why you're visiting me here and stuff. So I waited.
Well, that's how I small talk. I don't know about you, but
that would have been a normal way for me to do that. That's right. But I suppressed that sort of urge or whatever, and just waited for them to ask me. Right. And so, again, I'd been seeing them for maybe 3 years or something by that time on PFEs and stuff. And finally they came out one PFE and just said, Dad, what's going on? Why are you here? And what's happening? Right. So I told him, and that was an interesting conversation. Right. It's hard telling your kids like that.
I can imagine. I don't have kids, but I can just, all I really can do is imagine. Do your daughter's friends know about you and stuff like that?
Yeah, everybody.
And her parents?
Everybody.
Or their parents?
Everybody.
We've got a bee visiting us.
And I wouldn't say that was... I wouldn't say that was good for her exactly at times. Right. So there's been she's obviously faced some prejudice against me about that. But on the other hand, I'm very lucky. Right. And even when I went back to jail, they were writing positive stories about me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I went back to jail, and they wrote positive stories about me after I failed.
Right.
And when I got my parole, the Abbotsford Times put a big story right on the front page about me getting out of jail.
Right.
So,
you can't hide it even if you want
my
to.
My daughter's sort of proud of me.
Okay.
Right. So it's not, even though some people judge me and all that, and she gets that, she thinks I'm a superstar. Right. When she was little, I used to go take her to the Christmas parade, and again, I've had quite a presence here in Mission, and I've known all the mayors and the MLAs that have been present in this community since I got out. And so I used to go to the Christmas parade, and I'd be standing on the side with her, and there the mayor and the MLA would walk by, and they wouldn't do it to anybody else. They'd all of a sudden see me, and they'd walk over and shake my hand. And so she thought that I was somebody that was like,
you're kind of a celebrity.
A celebrity, right? Exactly. So it's been easy for her to accept it.
Oh, okay.
My other sons, not so much, and which is interesting because my other sons and their mother, she was a rounder woman.
Right.
My current wife's a really square-jawed type woman, which means she's never been in trouble. She doesn't smoke or drink or do any of those bad things that my ex-wife does and did, and lived with people that were criminals, and my sons went through a lot of criminal activity when they were young, growing up, right? And yet they have found it harder to adjust to the notion of who I am than my daughter, who and I think that's partly because of me not being there, but it's also partly because of the whole criminal subculture and how I fit into that culture, and how they see me fitting into that culture, as opposed to my daughter sees me fitting into society.
Right.
That part of my life is not really.
She's never really known you to be a criminal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And my sons haven't really known me as a criminal, but the people they know, they live in Victoria, where I had a huge reputation as being a bad guy.
Right.
And so they know all kinds of people when they were growing up who knew me and told stories about what I did and stuff, and my bullshit stuff.
Right.
And so they've got this sort of tainted picture.
Right.
Even though they're more accepting of the criminal lifestyle,
they're
more judgmental about me being a part of it, as opposed to my wife. My daughter is not like
interesting incongruity, I guess.
Yeah, it is. You wouldn't have thought that would be the case, right? But that's how it's turned out. Yeah.
I actually know your nephew Jay.
Yeah.
I know him from he's in recovery, and as am I now. Yeah.
Absolutely. He works for John Howard now.
Is that what he does? Yeah. He moved to the island, and so I haven't actually physically seen him. I talk to him maybe once every few months, though.
No, he's got his foot on the right door right now.
Yeah. So, got any hobbies? What do you do?
Well,
what do you do when you're not?
I've done various things in my life, but I guess a hobby of mine would be I kind of like building models a bit, right? And I don't read very much anymore. I used to read a lot. My eyes are kind of bad nowadays. So I can't see too good. I'd say learning.
Learning
is my hobby.
Right.
I really love to learn. I really love to think that every day I'm learning something different. And working with people, it really does give you an opportunity to learn something different every day, because there's so many different angles and things that you just, it's endless.
It can also be exhausting, though, I've found, too. You need space from it, like solitude.
Absolutely.
I've found.
And that's where I think the farm and the community garden that we first took over before the farm has really provided me with a real good grounding. In fact, that's what this project's really called. Even though this is Emma's Acres, it's a part of a bigger project called Grounded in the Ground.
Oh, nice.
So the whole notion of getting in touch with your roots, kind of Marxist theory, right?
Yeah. So, How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife in Millhaven.
Okay. Millhaven's a maximum security prison in Ontario.
That's right, just outside of Kingston.
Right.
And basically, she was going to Queen's University.
Okay.
And she's a white woman, but she was studying black history.
Okay. Yeah.
She became quite interested. In fact, she got involved with quite a few black guys and stuff. She was kind of interested in black history.
Yeah.
And she belonged to the West Indian Society at Queen's.
Right.
And my best friend in Millhaven was a black guy who was the founder of a group called BIFA, Black Inmates and Friends.
I haven't heard that word in years. Yeah.
So he convinced me to come into the group.
Yeah.
And I was his, I think I was the social coordinator or something. I forget. I had some official.
Of BIFA?
Yeah.
Were you the token white guy?
Yeah, I was the token white guy. Exactly. I was the token white guy. I was only, some other white guys occasionally would come down, but not very often. I was the guy that was always there. But he was my best friend too. I was really close to him, and that's how I met her actually. So she was coming in, and she kind of had an infatuation with him, not me. And I'm just a sort of side.
Well, you're the white guy.
I'm the rebounder, right? But she liked him, and she liked me too.
Yeah.
But she really liked him, and so when he left there, in those days you couldn't write to each other. It was before the charter was changed, and so to get permission to write to a prisoner, you had to have permission from the warden of each institution, even your family. So and if it wasn't family, you probably weren't going to get permission. So it had to really be your family. So I couldn't write him, or once he left, he was sort of. But we'd become quite attached, and she was going and visiting him, so I'd write her and tell her what I was doing, and she'd write me and tell me what he was doing, and so we ended up having this sort of really good understanding of one another. Right? She didn't talk a lot about herself at that time though, but I got a kind of a glimpse of who she was. She was a very kind, thoughtful person. Obviously had a lot of compassion and was a bit civil rights activist kind of person, right? And so basically, and then I got transferred out of Millhaven, and I lost contact with her. Okay. And I wrote a letter, I think, once, and it came back. Right. And so I didn't know what had happened to her, and so for a couple of years I didn't hear from her. And then when I was in Kent there, just after I'd become maybe a year and a half or so after I become a Christian, I get this letter from her. Right. And, I wasn't answering letters that people would write me when I ended up after I became a Christian. Because I used to get some weird people writing me. Right. And had sort of, because they liked the fact that I was a Brinks robber. They're fetishizing you. Yeah. So I kind of thought once I became a Christian, I didn't really respond to people anymore from back east. Right. Because
Kent's in BC.
Kent's in BC. So basically, I thought I would write her back though, for just to see how she was. I hadn't heard from her for a long time and everything, and I liked her and stuff. So I sent her back, and she wasn't into that. It wasn't the reason that she'd been contacting me. It wasn't my crime or anything. Right. In fact, I don't even know if she knew what I was in for at that time. Okay. I knew I was doing life, but I don't think she knew the details. But anyways, and so she wrote back, and we started writing, and about 6 months later, I just got a transfer out of Kent to Matsqui. Right. And she came out and visited me. Just wanted, said she just wanted to come and see me, and it was nice. So she came all the way out, and the rest is history. She went away and said she wasn't going to come back for about 6 months, but something happened. She ended up getting a ticket that she could get for free, and she just decided she'd move out here. And fucking plopped herself down, and first in Abbotsford with a friend of mine, and she was staying with his wife, and then moved over with my parents when I moved to William Head from Matsqui. Wow. And started visiting me, and then we got married in William Head in 1986, I think it was. So we've been married 30 years. Oh wow. 31, it's coming up. Holy so crap. Yeah, it must have been 1987 though. So it was 30 years this year, so it'll be 31 in June.
There's a story for you.
Yeah. She just did an interview this morning for CBC Halifax about being married in jail. Yeah.
How are you doing for time?
Well, I was going to give you a lot more time, and in fact, I still can. But
it's okay.
I got this urgent thing with my grandson. That I need to take him to the hospital. But we can do another about 5 or 10 minutes.
Sure. Okay. Let me dial up some questions. Is there anything you'd change about your life? Like any kind of regrets or anything like that?
Well, I have huge regrets. Right. But they're funny. Regrets are funny. Because, you can have regrets and they can just linger there as weights around your shoulders. Right. Or they can motivate you to be a better person. Right. So my regrets are things that actually inspire me to be better. Not where, I don't... to wallow in them, I guess you might say, right? I use them to try to improve myself and to see me as a better person than I was then, and to make better decisions this time, and recognizing I can't change the past, and I wished I could, but I can't. So what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to make today and tomorrow better than that. Right. And so that's what I work at all the time, every day. I've been doing that pretty much since I became a Christian. Right. It was kind of a basic Christian ideal, I guess, although I don't think people articulate it that way quite, but that's how I see it. And again, it's what gets me through, and my faith is very strong. I don't go to church, and so I feel I'm a poor Christian.
Okay.
I swear a lot. And, I was offered
Perfect.
by the head chaplain of Canada one time, the correctional chaplain. He offered to put me in school to become a chaplain.
Yeah.
And I told him I don't think I can do that. I mean, I can't see saying some of the words I say from the pulpit. There's a few choice ones I just can't get rid of. Right.
Right.
The jargon of jail. I certainly notice that I can avoid those words usually in a social situation. I can be a comedian.
They pop up pretty easy
but
though,
it
eh?
couldn't,
Yeah.
If you get me rattled, I'm kind of like a newfie. My accent, their accent starts coming out, and my swear words start coming out. So, it's so I don't know about being a chaplain, but my faith is strong. I don't really even go to church anymore much, but I know God's directed me in my steps, and I believe He put me on this path. I mean, I believe He introduced me and my wife, and why we're so congruent. Right? We've got so much in common. We really, we've been doing this together at first I did it all by myself from 92 to 97, but then she became my boss.
Right.
And she's the executive director, so she's more than boss than just the house now. She's total boss. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, she's bossy too. Right? No, she isn't bossy. And we get, again, she's a very amazing, intelligent woman, and has been a huge asset to my change and my direction. And I wouldn't has helped facilitate it, right? It's me too and doing my work, but it's without people to encourage you, especially when you doubt yourself so much. And back to what we were talking about earlier, prison really, really does force you to doubt yourself.
Right.
Like, there's so many things. I mean, I've been in riots.
Yeah.
I felt fear like nobody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a brave man. I know that because I know how it feels to be a fucking scared shitless, buddy.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And it's not good, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the bottom line is that she's just so good at helping me work through that stuff and keep me confident that I can do what I say I can do, and that's really important to me, and she helps me fulfill those things. She sometimes gets me into things. In fact, she more often than not does that.
Yeah.
But again, that's something that's sort of been a huge part of the reason I've been successful.
Right.
Is I was such an introverted person before I went to prison.
Right.
All my life when I was young, even growing up, I was kind of introverted. So this has forced me to come out and accept myself. Right. And by doing that, again, back to I'm a huge fan of accountability. I believe that accountability empowers people to be the best they can be.
Right.
And, some people think of it as punishment or bad or something, but it doesn't just mean about the bad things. Being accountable doesn't just mean, oh, gee, I'm accountable for all the mistakes I made.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm accountable for those things too.
Yeah.
But I'm accountable for how I behave every day.
Right.
And that's needs to. Once I accept that, I can then start to have power in some things that are habitual.
Right. It gives you agency, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agency, very good word.
Right. Yeah.
And again, and so many, back to what we were saying earlier too, so many of the things that I was doing that propelled me to just keep spiraling from the time I was 19 into this criminal justice system, even before that, but in particular after that, was because it was just self-fulfilling, all this stuff, and there was no way to break the cycle out, right? As of now, I mean, by being accountable, I can put the brakes on. I can say, no, that stops now, right? It doesn't have to happen, and these unconscious habits that I have need to be addressed, and I need to find out what they are, and I need to talk to people and be open and transparent so they can tell me too. So I got a mirror, right? So, because I know that I'm not stupid. I'm not any different than I was when I was my whole life. Right. I'm the same man and everything. So I know what I used to do and what I used to be like. I have to be on guard against that because I don't want to be that person. No. Right? Then I did want to be, I admit that. So I got something going for me. I don't want to be now. But that doesn't mean that if I'm not on guard that I won't somehow fall back into bad habits. Right. And in fact, back to when I went back to jail, it was part of that. Right. So I hadn't fallen into where I was going to pull armed robberies or anything, but I had gone back to the point where I thought I needed guns to protect myself.
Sort of on the spectrum somewhere.
Absolutely.
Got a gentleman here.
Sorry to bother you guys. I'm going to make it some smoking.
I'm okay, man. Much appreciated.
I have to run too, so maybe, but I'll come and get it when I come back.
Okay. Sure.
Thanks, man. Yeah. All right. 2 questions. One's a short one. One's a longer one, but it's perfect timing. So a lot of people who are going to be listening to this, like I said, this is all alien stuff to them. I'm the first person they've ever met a lot of the time. So what would you have to say to people who don't know anything about this and might have preconceived notions about you, about this, your work, inmates, the criminal justice system, just anything you'd want to say to people?
Well, what would I like to say about people?
I know it's a very broad question.
It's a broad question. I mean, it probably simply just we need to be open-minded,
right?
And we need to show compassion to others,
right?
And not because we're soft, but because we're right.
Right.
That's the right thing to do.
Right.
So I know it's easy to stereotype people with busy lives, and you've got lots on your head, and you don't, put this group there and this group there. But that's just so not positive as social endeavor. Is to make a better world, to make a better society, we need to include everybody, including the criminal element. Right. That's just going to make a better world.
I agree. So if for the people who are listening and who might be interested, where could they find L.I.N.C and Emma's Acres online and things like that?
Yeah, it is online. I'm not a technological
You're not a
kind of guy.
I can probably find that stuff.
It's under L.I.N.C Society. I think there's a website, and I think she's on Twitter and Facebook.
All right. I can find
my wife is like
she takes care of that part.
Media expert, right? Yeah, absolutely. Again, as I said earlier, since about 1992, I guess. 92 I think was the first one in the province. Right. I've had something written about me in a major newspaper, magazine, or interviews on TV, and that's all about her. Okay. I don't like doing that stuff at all, but I do see that back to that it's not comfortable telling people your baddest things. It doesn't come easy, but it is something that I believe needs to be done so that people do get a greater understanding of people who are like me that have made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and unforgivable mistakes. I don't expect anybody to forgive me. I know that's a hard thing when somebody kills. I've had people murdered that were close to me. It's hard to forgive the person that killed that person, it just isn't easy. But the fact is that we still need to figure out a way to move forward and not just get stuck on hatred and vengeance and all that stuff. We need to move past that. We need to see, again, our greater humanity. I've been fortunate enough to make connection with the daughter of the man I murdered. We become best friends. Oh, wow. And like literally best friends. She says she loves me, and I say I love her. And I feel like she's part of my family. And we have a thing that it's an African word. It means, it's Sabono. And she runs the Sabono project now. She's adapted that. I knew that word from my wife being a black historian. She knew some Zulu, and it's a Zulu word actually. And what it means, but I learned more about what it meant when I was in prison, and I read this book called Houses of Healing by a woman named Susan Kazurner, I think her name is, and it's a great book. And in there, though, she used this book, she says this thing about Sabono, and how Sabono literally means I see you, and not your outer self, but you, inside, the depth of you. So it's a very endearing like hello, like it's not really hello. Greeting, it's more than it's bigger than just a casual greeting. It's a very deep personal greeting in Zulu. So that's what me and her try to project, is this idea that we see past our crimes, that we see our humanity inside ourselves in each person, and that the more we see that and nurture that humanity in the other, the better that person will do. So we believe that, and so we see that, and both her and I. I mean, it's been very gratifying. Probably the most gratifying thing I've done in my life has been to develop this relationship with her, and to watch her go from somebody that was really damaged, really hurt, and imprisoned in a way in the street. She'll say this all the time. She was kind of in chains from what happened, and to see those chains come off her because we made contact, and that I encourage her and inspire her to get out there and do stuff, and she's just got out there and done stuff worldwide. She's been she's talked to Desmond Tutu, and she spoke at the United Nations in Geneva, and she's been at Stanford University, or not Stanford, Cambridge University in England, and she's been she's really got out there now, and it's really kind of made a rebirth.
Right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. We've been talking to Glenn Flett in his greenhouse of all places, and a couple minutes ago I was offered a smoky. I may take him up, take the guy who offered that to me. Thanks, Glenn, and thanks for talking to me.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks, Mark.
No problem. All right.
Okay.